Sportsman's Workshop videos are distributed by Ducks Unlimited. A portion of the purchase price will be used to restore, maintain, and protect wildlife habitat.
You know your Ford just may not do. You need a Chevy to get you out there and to bring you home when you're through. If you're gonna spend time fishing or hunting off deep in the woods, I wouldn't put keys in the ignition unless there's a Chevy underneath that hood. Cause my Chevy is built for the highways and built for the backcountry. It'll get you out on the byways and home as easy as 1, 2, 3. Yeah, if you're gonna tame the wild frontier, your Ford just may not do. You need a Chevy to get you out there and to bring you home when you're through. The heartbeat of America, today's truck is Chevrolet.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Workshop, brought to you by today's truck, Chevrolet. Nobody's winning like the heartbeat of America.
The Sportsman's Workshop is devoted to bringing to you the finest series of how-to-oriented films available. In order for us to do this, we have devoted much of our time into seeking out the finest professional talent in each category. In archery tactics for deer, our talent search brought us to the man who has built his entire professional journalistic career around the sport of hunting with a bow and arrow. With a number of books to his credit and a respected byline in most of this nation's outdoor magazines, Chuck Adams shows you how to turn his years of experience into practical working knowledge in the field. 90% of the success in the archery deer hunter's field comes to those who have the experience and the know-how. Chuck shows you how to join those ranks by revealing his secrets for success. Known to many as the second season, the numbers of sportsmen who have taken up the challenge of hunting deer with a bow has grown tremendously over the past few years. However, even with the advance of the modern-day compound bow and other equipment, success only comes to those who have taken the time to learn how to use this equipment effectively and to study the habits of the deer they pursue.
Learning to shoot accurately and hunt effectively takes time and patience. It also requires some well-chosen shooting equipment. To begin with, you only need 10 or 12 basic items. The most important item that you'll buy and the most expensive is a compound bow. About 97% of the hunters in the United States currently use compound bows because they shoot flat and shoot accurately. The second thing that you should buy is a good bow quiver to attach to the bow. A bow quiver like this should have a protective hood on top to keep broadheads from cutting you and keep the blades from becoming dull. Once you buy those two items, you should pick up a good bow sight made of metal that has 4 or 5 sturdy brass sight pins. This sight should be designed so it bolts directly to the sight of a bow. The only other kind of equipment you need on your bow is a stabilizer. A stabilizer prevents your hand from torquing when you shoot the bow. This gives you more accurate arrow flight and better accuracy on targets and game. Once you've picked up these basic shooting items, the only other things you need to shoot are an arm guard to protect your arm and to hold your sleeve down for accuracy, and a shooting tab or a finger glove. I prefer a tab because a tab gives you a slicker, better release and a little better accuracy. Now, once you get these basic items, the next thing you have to do is think about arrowheads. A bow hunter should choose 2 or 3 different kinds of arrowheads for target shooting and deer hunting. The most important head and the most difficult to choose is the broadhead. Every good deer broadhead has 3 or 4 blades that cut a hole at least 1 inch wide. My favorite broadhead has a camouflage center section made of aluminum, a sharp steel tip for good penetration, and 4 blades. A broadhead tends to fly inaccurately unless it's properly designed. Therefore, you should choose a broadhead that is aerodynamic and preferably has cutouts in the blades to allow air to pass through sideways when the arrow flies through the air. Such an arrowhead should screw attached to the arrow. I always use a broadhead wrench when screw attaching so I don't cut my fingers. A second arrowhead that you should buy is the field point. This is used primarily for target shooting. A field point is made of steel, has a sharp tip, and goes in and out of the target quite easily. There's one other arrowhead that you might want to pick up. It's called a blunt. It's flat on the front end, and you use it primarily for shooting at stumps and dirt clumps out in the field while you're practicing prior to deer season. This head is quite durable and does not burrow under grass and leaves when you shoot. Although aluminum arrows are not the only kind of arrows sold at archery stores, they're by far the most accurate, they're the best camouflaged, they're the most durable, and they're fully waterproof. If you plan to hunt deer primarily from tree stands, you might want to invest in a compact rangefinder such as this model. It weighs very little and goes conveniently in a shirt pocket. It's a lot handier than the larger long-range rangefinders that are sold at some archery stores. Although a small bow hunting rangefinder can be carried in a pocket, I prefer to carry mine in the padded belt pouch to protect it from dirt and debris. Once you've selected your basic bow shooting equipment, and once you've learned to use it fairly well, the next step is finding a decent place to hunt deer. If you already have a decent place to hunt deer, so much the better. If you don't, you should talk to local landowners and expert deer hunters you know to find some general places. Once you've done that, the next step is finding some good maps to show you particulars about the areas you want to hunt. To do this, go to your local map store and buy some good topographic maps. Most people think most bow hunters should dress in head-to-toe leaf print camouflage. Nothing could be farther from the truth. All a bow hunter has to do is break up and destroy his human outline with 2 or more contrasting colors in his clothing. If he wears, let's say, a contrasting plaid shirt from the waist up, he's destroyed the look of his upper body, and a deer is not going to recognize him as a human, even if the area from his belt down looks like the lower half of a human. For the bulk of my bow hunting, I wear some sort of plaid shirt, faded Levi's, a belt that's old and dull with no shiny buckle, boots that aren't squeaky or shiny, and some sort of hat to keep my hair down. The other thing you need to consider when choosing any bow hunting outfit is the fact that it must be quiet. If the surface of your clothing is noisy, it's going to squawk and scrape and make all kinds of noise, more noise than you would ever believe possible. There's a real good test you can make in the store. Run your fingernails across the surface of the clothes. If you can audibly hear any sort of scrape or whine when you do that, that particular garment is next to worthless in the bow hunting woods. The best time to scout and the best time to set up a stand is right in the middle of the day. because at that time the deer are in their beds. They may smell you come in, may hear you come in, but chances are they'll lie over there 100 yards or 200 yards and not move. A deer's nose is so sensitive that you can never completely cover your odor. As a result, even when I'm scouting, I usually squirt some sort of odor masking scent on my boot soles before I go in. This doesn't completely mask my scent. However, within 10 or 15 minutes of when I leave that area, the odor masking scent on my feet is going to completely mask over what little scent I've left on the ground of my own. Walk into the stand avoiding the majority of the high-growing shrubbery, because if you walk through heavy shrubbery, you're going to leave scent on that shrubbery from your pant legs that is going to linger for a longer period of time. This is an excellent place for a tree stand location. For one thing, there's heavy bedding cover right over here. For another, there are two nice feeding fields over here, one cornfield and one alfalfa field. After checking out trails in this area, I found that there were tracks littering this trail. They're going both directions. That tells me that the deer are coming out of the bedding cover in the evening, going to the feeding fields, and then in the morning they're coming back to bed in the bedding area. The next step is to find a tree suitable for a tree stand. I thought about these trees. They're nice and straight, but they're dead. A dead tree can blow over in the wind, and it can also harbor insects that can bite the heck out of you. This is a tree that I decided to put my stand in. I decided for several reasons. One, it's about 10 inches in diameter, which takes this particular tree stand model. Two, it's nice and straight, so I won't be tipping. Three, it's right beside the trail that the deer are using heavily. As a result, I should get a nice 15 or 20 yard shot after a deer walks by. The ideal tree stand tree is a relatively straight trunk tree with a diameter of 10 to 12 inches. It's relatively limbless up to about 20 feet, so I can climb up to that level with the stand, so I don't have to saw off a lot of branches. So the branches that I do saw off, the butts don't get in the way. The only other thing you need in a tree stand tree is that it be within good solid shooting range of the trail you expect the deer to come out, which is about 20 yards. When using any climbing tree stand, always remember to go slow and easy. That way you'll be quiet when you go up. White-tailed deer are hunted out of tree stands 90 to 95% of the time because the habitat they live on is too heavily overgrown and noisy to walk through. You just can't get close to the deer. One of the reasons I picked this particular area is it's close to the willows where these deer are probably bedding, where I hope they're bedding, and as a result, they're likely to come out, meander around a lot, and give me the best chance for a shot. Once I climb the tree, I'm going to settle into a comfortable position. I'm going to sit there with as little motion and as little noise as possible, and I'm going to wait. One of the most difficult things a bow hunter has to do is draw his bow to shoot. There's more movement involved in drawing your bow than anything else you'll do. As a result, if you're tree stand hunting, you try to pick a tree that has a background of leaves or branches or something. This further helps to break your outline. It doesn't matter what your clothes are like. If you're against a blue sky, you're going to look like a black figure to a deer that looks up. There's no such thing as a perfect bow hunting situation. This area is absolutely loaded with deer, with bedding grounds behind me across the road and a good alfalfa feeding field in front. The trail I'm walking down is littered with fresh deer tracks going in both directions. This tells me that the deer are actively using this field. The problem I have is I have permission to hunt this alfalfa field, but not the private property across the road. As a result, I can't put up a stand in the intermediate area where deer move in the evening. What I have to do is somehow figure out an ambush strategy in the corner of this field where the deer are moving through late in the evening. There is some high-growing grass here and some stunted trees, but nothing suitable for a tree stand. As a result, I need to put up some kind of ground blind on the downwind side of where these deer are passing through. By doing that, I have a good chance of ambushing them as they slip out of the edge of the heavy cover late in the evening. There are two problems I have to solve when using a ground blind in this particular situation. First, you must locate your stand where the deer are not likely to see or smell you. Second, you must set your stand up within good shooting range of where the deer are going to pass by. This particular trail is the heaviest used trail coming into this field. As a result, I've set my stand up within about 5 yards to give me a point-blank shot. The second best trail is about 30 yards down the way here. I can hit a deer at 30 yards if it's standing broadside, so any deer that goes by there is in deep, dark trouble. I've noticed from past experience that the wind usually blows from the west in the evening in this location. As a result, I've decided to set up a ground blind on the downwind side of these two productive trails. A ground blind is important for several different reasons. Although a bow hunter could simply back into the shrubbery and wait for deer, he's going to make some noise in the shrubbery if he tries to draw his bow and shoot. A ground blind gives you a clear area to draw and shoot, and it also hides you behind some camouflage netting material. This material should blend more or less with the background behind you. You should never put up a ground blind out in the field because it sticks out like a sore thumb. You should always put it in front of some outline breaking cover. This particular stand is the best on the market. It has good camouflage netting. It stands up high enough to allow a bow hunter to crouch behind, and it can be set up in a V pattern which camouflages the bow hunter from two directions. Now, to hunt the deer, I'll try to reach this ground blind an hour or two before the deer arrive, if the wind is right. Unfortunately, a bow hunter usually has a problem with the wind shifting right at sundown. The wind here blows from the east all day long on an average clear day, shifts to blowing from the west around sundown, and stays that way until the following morning. The problem I have is somehow sneaking in here right at sundown after the wind has changed, squatting down and waiting without scaring every deer in the whole area. The road behind me is hard dirt, which helps. I can sneak down, and up in here, I've beaten out a trail a couple of days before that I can sneak down without too much noise. Some old propeller-headed doe is going to mess me up half the time I walk down the road. She's going to run right through the middle of the best area, snorting and blowing and screwing everything up. But I can't help that. I can't hunt across the road, so I have to make the most of what I've got. Now, once I get to the blind site, I take out an arrow and I squat down. There's nothing complicated about using a ground blind to hunt deer. Once you sneak to your stand location and crouch down behind the camouflage netting, you should squirt a little odor masking scent in the area to help cover your own human odor. This scent should match the scent that is in the particular area. The scent I'm using here is natural scent, which smells exactly like the deer that have been using this field. Once you've squirted scent around, you should shift around in your stand to assume a comfortable position. You should lift your bow to make sure it clears the stand and other things around the stand. You should pull out a broadhead arrow, nock it, and then crouch until deer come by. Be sure that you're comfortable because you may be waiting in this position for over an hour. It's very important to remember that deer have excellent eyes. As a result, when drawing on a deer that pops out of the edge of the cover, you should begin your draw very low under the protection of the camouflage netting. Once you've drawn completely back, you should rotate your bow, slowly raise up, and aim. With any luck, the deer won't see the movement, and you can go ahead and shoot. White-tailed deer water at least once a day, sometimes more than once if the weather is excessively hot. The most productive watering areas are within 2 or 3 feet of heavy cover. Midday deer are very secretive by nature and don't like to poke their noses very far out of the brush. You can see where the deer have planted their feet in the mud and taken short, cool drinks. I've found an excellent watering trail here beside this lake. There are tracks going both directions. If we follow this trail back into the brush a short ways, we should find a good stand location. You can find watering trails like this in any decent whitetail habitat. Once you've found such a trail, the only other thing you need to do is find a good stand location. I've located my tree stand right beside this barbed wire fence because I expect deer to stop before they jump over the top. That'll give me a good shot. This platform ladder is an ideal choice for the small diameter trees in this area. The ladder's high enough to put my scent above the deer and is steady enough to shoot off of.
We asked the International Motorsports Association to challenge the top 4 compact 4x4s in a test of climbing power in the Baja.
The Baja. Off-road racing doesn't get any tougher.
All 4 powered up the hill. But Chevy S10 left the others in the dust. The new 1991 Chevy S10, kicking dirt and taking names.
The heartbeat of America.
Today's truck is Chevrolet.
A lot of people think that the only place you can bow hunt deer is in the heavy woods. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Some of the best deer country in the world is in the wide open plains and in areas with high ridges and open coulees. This country can be very effectively hunted if a bow hunter stalks along, stopping periodically to look over ridgelines with his binoculars. There are 2 basic kinds of bow hunting on foot, stalking and still hunting. They're very similar, but not exactly the same. In still hunting, the hunter moves continuously in very broken terrain, hoping that he'll walk within range of unexpected deer before they see him. A stalking hunter moves along ridge tops for short distances, stops and looks around with his binoculars, then moves on. A stalking bow hunter's first concern is paying attention to the wind. If the wind is blowing to his back, every deer within half a mile is going to smell him and run away. You should choose the footwear you bow hunt in with care. Too many bow hunters use Vibram soles when they hunt, which are very noisy in the woods. The kind of boot sole I prefer is a soft crepe sole, which gives with underfoot debris. There's one thing you should never forget when bow hunting open country deer. As a general rule, the terrain is lighter in coloration than the deep woods country where you hunt white-tailed deer. As a result, you should choose upper body wear that matches this lighter colored country. The most important thing when choosing camouflage is the area from your waist on up. When I'm bow hunting deer in open country, I very seldom skyline myself above the shoulders and never skyline myself above the waist when I'm peeking over into area where I might see a deer. The strategy I prefer when stalking deer in open country, like sagebrush country, is to drop on the downwind side of a ridge and move along with just my head and shoulders exposed. I'll peek over into little draws and valleys and eventually spot a deer I want to go after. By staying behind a ridge line in this way, I completely hide the noise that I make when I walk along, and the deer have very little chance of seeing me as I look over the ridgetop with my binoculars. I really enjoy stalking because it's so exciting and challenging. For one thing, you see the animal you're after a long time before you get a shot. For another, it's a real test to decide how to get from where you are to where the animal is without spooking the animal away. If you do everything right, keep below ridge lines, hug gullies, always go into the wind or in a crosswind direction, you have an excellent chance of sneaking within 30 or 40 yards of an open country deer.
Archery is the oldest form of sport hunting known to man, and in the field of big game hunting, deer have always been the #1 trophy. Whether you're hunting in the high country of the Rockies or the bayous of the South, the farm country of the Midwest or the hardwoods of the East, Chuck's methods will work for you. To hunt deer with a rifle is exciting, but there is something extra special about heading into the field with a bow and arrow.
I enjoy bow hunting more than any other sport because it's extremely challenging and it's extremely rewarding when it's done properly. The primary reward for a beginning bow hunter is merely being out there and reaping the fringe benefits that he runs into everywhere he goes.
Ducks, geese, swans, they're the barometers of our health. They need plenty of clean air and water, just like we do. But when they start to disappear, we know our environment is in danger, and so are we. Ducks Unlimited can bring them back by restoring their habitat. Join Ducks Unlimited. Protecting waterfowl protects us all.